Hey there, I'm Sadaf Beynon, and this is Conversations That Grow, where we explore the moments that shape who we become as leaders and people. Each week, I sit down with leaders, founders, and change makers to talk about the stories and the shifts that shape them, because real growth doesn't just happen through strategy, it happens through conversation. Today, I'm joined by Simone Knego. She's a two-time TEDx speaker, best-selling author of The Extraordinary Unordinary You, and the co-host of a podcast she runs with her daughter. Simone's all about redefining leadership, not as something reserved for people with big titles or corner offices, but as something we live out in the everyday moments of showing up, speaking up, and using our voice. She calls it the kitchen table leadership, and to me, it's such a refreshing take on what it really means to lead. Simone, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
Awesome. Simone, I always like to start with this. What's a conversation you've had that changed the way you think about leadership or business?
I think one of the most interesting conversations I had about leadership was when I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, because I used to think of leadership as what happens in the boardroom, what happens behind the title. But when you're doing something completely different, completely out of your comfort zone, you think of leadership differently. So that conversation between our team, like if everybody can't make it, do we all stay behind? What happens if someone's struggling? Do we help them with their pack? Choices that are all leadership choices, leadership decisions, but something I would never have thought of before having an experience like that.
That's very cool. I'd love for you to just unpack that a little bit more. And what was it in that experience? Maybe share the conversation or the story around it.
Yeah, so I climbed Kilimanjaro 10 years ago. So 2015, there were 16 of us. I didn't know anybody on the team. I showed up in Tanzania, and not only did I have, people that I'm climbing with that I didn't know, I also had a tent mate, which was fantastic because she turned out to be amazing. But that idea of the decisions that we make when we're sitting around a table is very different than what we actually do in real life. So the conversations that we had actually before we started climbing were exactly that. They were, okay, so this is leadership at altitude, right? Completely different thought process. When, for example, we did have someone that was struggling and the decision was made, we keep going, and she didn't want to stop. She just had to go slower. And we had to just make the best decision for the team because, again, staying at high altitude, it's not good for you, obviously, and you're not getting the oxygen that you really need. So the decision was made that we would keep going, and she did continue. Actually, one of the guys stayed behind with her and one of the porters and one of the other guides, and everybody made it. She just took a little bit longer. So by the time she got up, we were ready to go back down, which was good because one of the guys that was in the bigger group, he was already really struggling once we got up there. So, I think a lot of times we really think about leadership as what happens in business, but it really is what happens in life, the choices that we make every day.
In the moment.
Yeah, in the moments. I mean, and the reason I love calling it kitchen table leadership is because there's so many decisions we make around the kitchen table, but nobody's ever called that leadership. So we've never thought about it like that before.
What was your learning in that experience?
I learned a lot in that experience. So directly about leadership, it was really thinking about, it's not always the person that's loudest, not always the person that's strongest, that's going to be the one leading people in a more extreme environment. We have one guy on our team who he was just the ultimate optimist, and he woke up every morning happy and went through the motions. Now, he was a cancer survivor. He had like 70 something surgeries. But he was the guy who would keep us going, right? If someone was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. He's like, oh yes, you can do it. If I did all these things, you can absolutely do this. And I think that was such a great takeaway for me. I mean, I learned a lot about myself in terms of building confidence, believing in myself, right? Not just setting a goal, but putting in the work.
Yeah.
All of those things were really, I really thought about those the entire time, because this is something that a situation I would have never chosen for myself before that moment. Yeah. Like, I'm not a mountain climber. That's not my thing. I live in Florida, like at sea level, I'm going over 19,000 feet. So that was a big transition, a big change for me to see myself differently and not think about, oh, everybody else out there is a leader, or everybody else out there is competent. It's not reserved for someone else, right? Everything that we do, we need to build. We need to build confidence. When we talk about leadership, we have to believe that we are a leader to be able to move forward.
Yeah. And it's actually quite incredible how our experiences shape that, because just thinking about what you were saying about the man who had cancer and he'd come out of it, his perspective is different based on his experience and and it's not just those kinds of experiences don't just, how do I say this, that they're not just for ourselves. We share them without maybe even realizing it, because your perspective changes, the way you talk changes.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would say that the way my perspective now is so different than before I started that climb. And the way I talk about things is so different. I was not a confident person because I didn't understand that it was a skill. I really did think it was something other people had, and I just didn't. And I put up this facade. I did the fake it till you make it. That doesn't work, by the way. So I really learned a lot about myself to be able to move forward in a different fashion. And for me, it was also so important because what am I modeling for my kids? That's a big thing about leadership is I truly believe modeling matters more than managing, because if we're telling someone this is what you need to do, but we're not doing it ourselves, like what kind of example are we setting? I even use it as an example with my kids. Like if I'm telling them they need to read 60 books and I'm just on my phone all the time or watching TV, like what's going to motivate them to do that? So I think it's so important what we model.
That's really insightful. What was it you said? Model versus?
I said modeling matters more than managing.
Yes, that's
right. It's a lot of M's. It's a lot of M's.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. So, Simone, something you have said before is that leadership isn't about a title. It's about showing up, speaking up. Can you unpack that for us too?
Yeah. Again, a belief that I think a lot of people have is that leadership comes with a title. And there's actually statistics that show that a majority of middle managers don't feel like they're leaders because they feel like they're stuck in between the true leaders of the company and everything else. And to me, that was kind of shocking to see, oh, wait, it was like 80-something%. And I thought, but you actually do have the title of manager in there. But it was the idea that their mindset wasn't that they were a leader because they still felt like they didn't have the leadership qualities to be able to make the decisions. And when we talk about women, there are really interesting statistics like women as children, girls are taught to be kind. They are taught to, I think it's patience as well, but very few girls are taught to share their opinion, which again, that's leadership, right? We have to be able to say what we stand for and really thinking about the fact that you don't need a title to lead. I found a great story when I was doing my research about she started out as the legal secretary of Herb Kelleher, who was the president of Southwest. And she was the legal secretary. Then when they moved to Southwest, she was his administrative secretary, and she moved all of the way up into becoming the first president of a U.S. Airlines. And she didn't do it because she had a title. She did it because she cared about it, cared about what she was doing, the people that she was working with. And to me, that's like the ultimate leadership. And I'll hear people say, well, yeah, but I've never run an airline. Well, neither did she until she did. So I think a lot of times we're afraid to jump into different situations because we don't have that title or we haven't had that title before. But it really isn't about that. It's about the mindset we bring forward and the work we're willing to do.
Yeah, for sure. So what have
Yeah, I think you take back a bit of power that way, right? You're willing to do more things. You're really willing to, I don't want to say assert yourself more, but you really put yourself out there a bit more because wait, oh no, that's not reserved for someone else. I think a lot of people have that idea that certain jobs are reserved for the leaders, and it's the mindset that gets you there. And my husband and I were on vacation and we were sitting around the pool and we started a conversation with the couple next to us. And of course, what do you do? What do you do? Yeah. And the typical. Yeah. And so I started talking to them about this idea of leadership. And so the first question I asked him, I was like, so when you hear the word leader, what do you think of? And his first response was, well, not me. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And, I don't remember exactly what he does, but he's definitely a leader, right? And we went through that whole discussion of, well, do you help people? Do you make decisions? And he was like, I've never thought about it like that before. So it really is interesting when you start having conversations with people about what they think true leadership is. And it isn't the title. It's not the boardroom. It's what you do in the messy moments. It's what you do behind the scenes. And because that shows true character.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is fascinating, isn't it? Because like you said, it's not about the title. It's not about the boardroom. It's about influence in your space. How did this shift show up for you in your own life? Was it when you went climbing, or was there another more defining time?
So the mountain story was a big part of it. I also had another moment where, and this probably has more to do with confidence, but I think confidence is a big part of leadership. And I was at an event, a women's event. At the time, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had 6 children, and I had this facade up that I was tough and that I didn't cry. And I really didn't. I didn't cry for years because I thought if I started crying, everything would crack, right? It would all fall apart. I had an abusive boyfriend in high school, and that really affected my path moving forward. My husband knew the story, my kids knew the story, but I hadn't really told anybody anything else. And we're in this women's event, and they put on this video by Colby Calais, which is her video Try. And it was really about peeling back the layers for women and really being exactly who they are and not pretending. And I think that I went through life performing so much that I kind of had lost sight of who I was. If you would have asked me back then if I were a leader, and no, I'm not a leader, right? And it doesn't matter who you're leading. If you're leading a team, your family, right? Anything that you're leading, that is leadership. But that moment really transformed me because in that moment, we started talking about the things that we struggled with. And I thought everybody around me, had that perfect life, right? Based on what you see on social media. Everybody, you got the perfect pictures and the perfect spouse. And in that moment, we all started talking and I realized, oh, wait, no, I am not alone here. Like everybody is struggling with something. And I really broke down crying. And my friends were like, oh my gosh, what do we do with her? Because she never cries, right? But I didn't cry because I thought that if I did, it shows weakness, or that I would be judged because I had been pretending for so long. And so that was a big turning point for me because that is leadership, right? It's that modeling what matters and being able to talk about your struggles, not just the highlight moments. So I would say those are the 2 biggest aha moments that I had moving forward. But I mean, even since then, I think it's more interesting when I talk to other people and ask them their take on leadership, because typically it is the CEO, the vice president, the president, the person in the boardroom. And it really, I really like it to be a different conversation about how are you leading today versus who is the leader, because we're all leading.
Yeah. Yeah. Simone, first of all, I'm really sorry about your experience with your
Thank you.
boyfriend. I know that is not a nice place to be, or have been. But I hear what you're saying about leadership, and it's almost an internal decision, right? Talking about mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And then this part about how are we leading, I think that's really integral, because as we were saying, we're all leaders in some capacity or another, because we have spaces that we have influence in. But really the question is, how are we leading, and are we leading well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And, you know, what I see is that when you start changing the narrative about what leadership is, people show up differently. They show up differently to work. They show up differently in their family, because when they understand that leadership is influence and it's not the title, then it really changes so much of that mindset. And again, I'm a big believer in positive affirmations, daily gratitudes, and things that 10 years ago I would not have been doing. But I've realized how life-changing they've been for me in terms of changing the way I saw myself.
Yeah. So based on how we see ourselves, depending on the situations that we're in or what we've come out of or whatever's shaped that inside of us, do you think we are more drawn towards certain types of leadership? Because there's good leadership and there's bad leadership. What do you think to that?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely drawn to different types of leadership. We're also the idea of how fear plays a role in it. So when we're deciding, okay, are we going to step up for this job? Well, what if we fail, right? What if they judge me? What if this is not the right thing for me? Instead of taking that leap, and I think a lot of understanding the type of leader you are is the taking action. So we can say things all day long, but if we don't take the step forward, then we're just saying things. And, you know, in terms of good leadership and bad leadership, if we're talking about the leaders that we're looking at, yes. But if we're talking about how we want to build ourselves up as a leader, obviously we want to focus on being the best leader possible, which is about empathy and about modeling and listening, right? I think that's one of the biggest things as a leader is a lot of times it is there's not the connection, right? Yeah. It's really about correction. So but it's more important to have the connection versus the correction. So if someone's constantly telling you what you're doing wrong, instead of making that connection with you to see, okay, how can we collaborate? How can I help you? I mean, that's a true leader. That's a really good leader who is willing to step in and say, how can I help you? Instead of, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Empowering, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's right. Simone, let's dig into your idea of kitchen table leadership, which I love that phrase so much. Yeah, I'd love for you to unpack that and tell us what it means for you.
Yeah, I think for me it means that we need to stop waiting for the term leader and just start leading, right? Start doing the things that we know we want to do instead of waiting for someone to say, oh, this is what you should do. And I think what I mentioned before is that why I really love that term is because no matter who you are, it's the idea of the decisions that we make around the kitchen table, how much those impact our lives. So it's interesting because I was talking to a friend this morning and he said, you know what, Simone, I'm 52 years old. I've never had a kitchen table. And I thought, okay, this is going to be an interesting conversation. And he said, I wonder how different my life would be if I did have some of those conversations around a kitchen table. Like his parents got divorced young. And so, but it was very I thought it was very thoughtful when he said, I wonder how different it would be if I did have those times. He's like, now, obviously, I've had all kinds of conversations, but never around a kitchen table. And, when you think of the kitchen table, you think of family discussions and you think of chaos in my house, because with 6 children, it is can be very chaotic. Get in the queue, like wait, raise your hand. It's always funny how it goes. But we do make so many decisions every single day, and just think about when you're sitting there having breakfast and you're planning out what you're doing next. I mean, that's a leadership decision, and you might be sitting at the kitchen table. So it's the idea that we don't need to wait for anyone else to tell us it's leadership. Every decision we make, it's a leadership decision. Like when you go and you're waiting in traffic and someone is honking at you or they're trying to get in and you let them in, like, okay, that's a leadership decision. When you're like, I'm not going to get upset about this. It's the idea that your mindset is saying this doesn't, this is not going to affect my life. Let the person in, right? Be a kind person. And reminding ourselves of what we should be doing. And I don't want to say should, but what we're capable of doing. I think that is a huge part of leadership.
Curious, this kitchen table idea that you've also described as well, like how chaotic and how crazy and fun it can all be. Was this the same for you when you were growing up? Is this something that you saw in your parents?
Yeah, so a little bit different. I think we were a little bit more formal. So both my parents were physicians. My mom cooked dinner pretty much every single night. I mean, I remember a few times like Kentucky Fried Chicken or something when she was late at work. And
yeah,
but we always sat down together at the kitchen table. We always had discussions about our days. And so for me, I think it does have a really good memory. For some people, it might not. For some people, they might be like, the kitchen table was probably the worst experience for me because my parents forced me to do this or forced me to do that. Or my parents weren't around. So basically, I would eat all my meals by myself. But, the thought I have about it is no matter what the situation was, there were decisions that were made about around the table.
How does this kind of everyday leadership change the way we influence the people around us, do you think?
Well, I think when we see ourselves as leaders, we show up differently. We behave differently. We're willing to try new things. We're willing to step forward for things that probably before we wouldn't, because we didn't understand that we were leading, right? Like you shouldn't raise your hand because you're not a leader. Well, if you already think that you are a leader, then why wouldn't you raise your hand? So I think those are some of the ways that it will change people's ideas. And I do see, especially for me, I see way more motivation when I think of myself as, wait, I am a leader. Like, what am I going to do to help out? What am I going to do to benefit this company? What am I going to do to benefit this to give benefit to this conversation? I think all of those things are really part of the return of having that mindset that you are leading.
Yeah. Yeah. Simone, it's so interesting to me because this whole idea makes leadership feel accessible. It's not just something out there that you have to either work towards, your middle management, you got to work your way up. It's not that. It's something we practice right where we are. You were talking about the mindset.
Yeah, you're leading right where you are. So if you're, and part of that is that acceptance of, yes, I'm leading, and maybe I want to be doing something different in the future. But the words that we use when we talk about ourselves, when we talk to ourselves, I think those are so important. So my least favorite word is probably, well, I have a couple. One is can't, but because can't means won't, so it means you won't even try. But also the idea of just. So I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I'm just a middle manager. I'm just an assistant. And my thought is, or my opinion is, drop the just, right? Because you're not just anyone. You're not just anything. What you're doing is important. But But as soon as you start saying words like that, that's what your mind starts to believe. So you think that you're not enough, and you think that you're not a leader, and you think that you're not capable of more, because that's the way you talk to yourself. And I think that it's really important that we take a look and say, would we talk to our best friend this way? Most likely we wouldn't, right? We wouldn't say, oh, well, you're just a stay-at-home mom. You have no idea what's going on. But we do that to ourselves.
Yeah. So I'm curious, are these two words something that you have noticed in your own vocabulary at some point? Or is this something you've seen in your kids and you're like, we've got to change this? How did you pick up on those two words in particular?
Yeah. So can't is really something that my kids used to say, oh, I can't do that. Or no, I can't. Okay. And my husband used to say, okay, well, can't means won't, which means you're not going to try. Okay, so yes, you can. Yes, you can do it. And, it's really flipping the script on it. In terms of it was something that I used all the time, like justifying my existence, right? I'm just this, I'm just that, never feeling that I was good enough. And what's really interesting is when you start having conversations with people and you've heard me talk about drop the just, you'll notice how many times people will refer to themselves as just this or just that. I'm just a volunteer. And it's actually really interesting. And so I usually interrupt people and say, no, you're not just anything. And they're like, oh, I didn't even realize I was saying it. But that's part of the problem, is that we're on this loop where the way we talk to ourselves is not a positive situation. And so it really is hard to move forward when we believe that we can't. So it really is about talking to ourselves and saying, yes, you can. Instead of I can't, I can. I have a little, I call it a mindset hack, but it is Control-Alt-Delete, which back in the day, it was how you would reset a frozen computer. And I prefer to use it to reset a frozen mind, because we all get stuck in that loop of telling ourselves that we're not leading, that we're not enough, that we're not capable. And so the first step is control. You're going to have negative thoughts. I mean, we're human, right? We have fears, we have anxiety about things but understanding that you do have control. So that is about awareness. So as soon as that thought comes into your head, you ask yourself, is it real? Is it true? Like, is it really something that I need to be focused on? Most of the time, the answer is no. Alt is about alternative, which is tell yourself a better story. So instead of I can't, I can. Or instead of what if I fail, how about when I succeed? And finally, delete the habits and beliefs that don't serve you. Delete the comparison game. Delete the idea that you're not enough. Delete the idea that you're not leading. And, it's about that moving forward, because most of the stuff we tell ourselves isn't real. We just are so afraid to be able to say, oh yeah, you're capable of this. Raise your hand, because it's scary. But the thing is, if you want to, you have to take action. And if you want to be able to move forward, you have to get uncomfortable.
Wow. That is so true and so good. I love that hack, the
Thank
mindset
you.
hack. And that's really good. Yeah. And I get it, because I use those words too without even realizing it. The just one, especially. Not can't. That's where I agree with you. It comes from the kids. That's where I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
But the just one, yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we're always thinking that we have to justify what we're doing with our lives instead of owning it. I mean, we're in control. Like, obviously there's outside factors, but we might not be able to control the things that happen to us, but we can control how we respond to them. We can control how we move forward from them. But we have to be able to take that action.
Yeah. And there's some kind of echo to confidence in this, I think. And you actually linked leadership closely with confidence earlier when we were talking. Why is that connection so important, do you think?
Confident leaders build better teams. Confident leaders have better results. And the problem that we have is, or this is definitely true for me, is I didn't understand that it was a skill and you had to build it. I just thought it's something you're born with and you either have it or you don't. But that is so far from the truth, because like any skill, it takes practice, right? Just like thinking about your mindset. So if you're constantly telling yourself negative things, that's what you're going to believe. If you're telling yourself positive things, you can believe those too. So it's that idea of like working out one time and now you're a bodybuilder, or taking one Spanish lesson and now you're fluent. I mean, it doesn't happen that way. You have to work on it. So, and that's why when we understand that it's a skill and something that we build from the inside out by really looking at ourselves, asking the hard questions, seeing what we really want. And I think that's how we move forward. And I actually I have something called the REAL method, which is respect yourself, embrace your failures, ask yourself what you want, and live without limits. And, I created that method for building confidence because, again, I was someone that struggled with self-doubt for many, many years. I had that voice in my head. I called her the what if whisperer, also known as Sally, but the what if whisperer. We all have the voice in our head. But we have to be able to separate the things out. And so when we look at my REAL method, the reason I start with self-respect is I think that's foundational for everything, right? We have to be able to set boundaries. We have to be able to say no to things. We have to be able to raise our hand and say, yes, I'm capable of this. And as a child, I remember being taught to respect my elders, my peers, right? Everything in between, grandparents, teachers, all of the things. But never once do I remember being taught that the most important person to respect is yourself. Because a lot of times we go around thinking that we need to demand respect, right? We need to demand respect. This person is disrespecting me. But part of the problem is we're probably disrespecting ourselves, right? They've seen how we treat ourselves. And so how are they all of a sudden going to change the way we treat ourselves? So for me, it's not about demanding respect. It's about demonstrating it to ourselves. So if we're respecting ourselves and that's what other people see, that's how they're going to follow. Again, that modeling piece.
It's boundaries, isn't it? Yeah. So what have you seen in anyone that you worked with, or even in yourself, when actually creating those boundaries and setting those boundaries has helped build the confidence rather than shrink it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea of saying no to things that are not fulfilling to you. I mean, when you say no to something, you leave space for a new yes. And it's hard to say no without guilt, but there's a way to say it in a way that is still polite. Thank you so much for asking me right now. I have too many things going on, but I wish you well. I know you're going to do amazing. Something like that, where you don't have to feel guilty. You can't do everything, but we do put that pressure on ourselves that if someone asks, we have to say yes, or
feel compelled to say yes.
And even when I look at my, in volunteer work, that's a big one there, where people are like, oh my gosh, it's volunteer work. I have to say yes. But I also see it in friendships that people will ask for things within their friendship. Oh, I need to talk to you every day and I need to do this. And, that's not real life. Like, we all have to say, okay, this is too much for me. And in a way that is still respectful, but that we're respecting ourselves first.
Yeah, it's important. Thinking a bit more on confidence for people who struggle to speak up. What do you have a hack or a small step they can start with?
The speaking up is probably one of the hardest things, but it really is about telling yourself, those are for me, that's the positive affirmation part. Like, you deserve to be here. Your voice deserves to be heard. And again, it's a process. You have to say it to yourself all the time, but understanding that everybody else in the room, maybe there's like a statistic that 3% of the people in a room do 90% of the talking, something like that, something ridiculous, where you're like, oh, everybody's staying silent for fear that their idea is going to be rejected, or because they just can't even get their words in. But I think you have to have the idea of that you're just going to do it. You're going to take action. You're going to put your idea forward. And what's the worst that's going to happen, right? I think we have these scenarios that are, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired, or they're going to hate my idea. And most of the time it's just like, okay, you have a good idea. Go ahead and put it forward and test it with friends, right? I mean, practice. I feel for me, like when I go to speak somewhere, I want to make sure I know my topic really well so that I'm not setting myself up for failure. So when you're using your voice for something, it's about practice. And the more you start doing it, the better you're going to be.
Yeah. Listening to you speak, I mean, I think it's really clear that confidence and leadership both grow through repetition, right? It's like it's a muscle that you have to build over time.
Yeah, it's very true. It's definitely it's not a light switch. And that's true of it's so interesting because it's true of most things in our life, but we look at it differently because it's mindset, right? So we understand that if we want to change our health habits, whether it's we want to get in shape or we want to lose weight, we understand that it takes time. But when it comes to being able to use our voice or feeling like a leader, we think, oh, well, it just should either be there or it's not. And it's completely the opposite. It's just like every other skill. You have to build it.
And does that come down to comparing ourselves with other people who are obvious leaders or, obviously confident?
Yeah, I think that's a big problem. I mean, I definitely think that that's something that I struggled with for a long time. I used to think that the loudest person in the room was the most confident, but then when you started having conversations with them, sidebar conversations, you would understand that they actually really struggle with things. And they've just learned to use their voice in a certain way, but when they get home at the end of the day, they're miserable. So it's not about being the loudest person in the room. It's about that quiet confidence where you know what you stand for. You know that your opinion matters. You know that your voice matters. But we live in a society that compares everything, right? With social media, and we see all the highlight reels instead of what happens in real life. And for me, it's about communication. When you really have a conversation with somebody, you realize that, first of all, you're not alone in your struggles. And second of all, people struggle way more than you ever thought they did. So by being able to actually open up and have a conversation with someone, you're not only helping yourself, you're helping that other person as well.
That's very good. Thanks, Simone. If it's okay, I'd like to circle back to the I'm not a leader mindset, because so many people dismiss themselves as not a leader. As you pointed that out. What conversations could they be having that would help them shift that perspective?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I like to do this little exercise where write down all the things that you've done in the last 24 hours. Write down all the things that you've done in the last week. Now, give it to someone else to read. That person is going to say, "Oh my gosh, you have accomplished so much," right? You're leading at every corner. But if we're just looking at it ourselves, we're like, "No, we're not doing anything." I was like,
that was just this, and that was
yeah,
just that.
That was exactly just. And not that we need external validation, but sometimes I think we can't see past the piece of paper, right? We think that what we're doing really isn't making an impact, which is so far from the truth. So I think that is one of the little hacks that we can do to kind of say, okay, how am I leading right now? Instead of I'm not a leader. And I think it's really flipping the script. It's telling yourself, like I said before, a better story. So instead of I'm not leading, okay, how am I leading today? What are the things I'm doing today that are impacting other people, that are impacting my life?
Why do you think we're so quick to downplay the leadership that happens in the everyday?
I think because we've been told for a long time what leadership is, right? And what we've seen, what we've heard. I mean, the definition of leadership is not the things that you do every day. The definition of leadership has to do with the person running things. And if you really break that down, right? I mean, that is about influence, and the things that we do every day, that's running things, right? We are running our life. That makes us a leader. But for so long, society has said, and even when you watch movies, right, you see the leader, the person in the boardroom, the person with the money, the person that is in charge. And so the more we see that, the harder it is to define ourselves as leaders.
It's interesting because, we've talked about it, leadership doesn't start with a position, a title, but listening to the things you've been saying, it sounds like it starts with a choice to contribute.
Yeah, I 100% think that it's that idea that you want to make things better. You want to do something different. And instead of saying, oh, I'm just doing this because I need the promotion. No, I mean, you're doing it because, and again, I'm not going to guess what people's motivations are, but that thought process of that, why am I out here today doing this? Yes, I have to feed my family. But that's leadership, right? Doing these things, that is all leadership. So we just have to change the way we see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So for entrepreneurs, leaders running teams, how can they bring this idea of kitchen table leadership into their business or culture?
Yeah, I think it's about acknowledging everybody on the team. So a lot of times it's not just the team leader. It's when you have a full sit down discussion and everybody gets to contribute because everybody's ideas matter. So as soon as you create a scenario where you're only taking certain ideas or only allowing certain people to speak, it's very, very hard to then change their mindset about, well, I guess I don't matter, right? I guess my opinions don't matter. So it's that modeling from above that leadership is inclusive, that it's about taking action. It's about sharing your thoughts. And you know what? If everybody shares their thoughts and they aren't what they were looking for, then you go again. But I think a lot of things get lost or missed opportunities because someone was afraid to share what they came up with, share their thoughts on something. But if we had that more inclusive leadership where we said, everybody's a part of this team, let's see what we come up with. I think it's that collaboration is a much more successful way to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How can leaders in the workplace, how can they model confidence and self-leadership for the team?
So, yeah. Well, first of all, they have to build the confidence. So making sure that it's actually real confidence that they're modeling. And, when you're really confident, you're not afraid that someone's going to dispute what you have to say, right? You're like, okay. And you're also not, for me, I'll give you an example of, there were times where I haven't been chosen for certain roles, haven't been chosen for certain speaking engagements, but I don't ever go back and say, oh, that's someone else's fault, or, oh, I can't believe they got it. No, it's you celebrate the other person because they deserved it. In that moment, they were the right person for that job. They were the right person for that experience. And I think that as a leader, if we run things more like that, where we're not so worried, we're not competing with everyone around us, we're competing with ourselves. And I think that's a completely different mindset because especially in the workplace, there's so much competition against each other. Instead of saying, how can I be my best? How can I do my best? Because when I'm doing my best, it benefits everyone.
Yeah. And going back to some of the things we were saying before, I think the whole idea replicates itself even in the workplace because people often learn more from how we lead in those kitchen table moments in the office than from what's written in the playbook.
Yeah. If you're constantly berating someone, if you're constantly telling them what they're doing wrong, do you think anybody wants to bring an idea to you? No, because they're sure they're going to get shot down. But when someone brings an idea and you say, that's a great idea, I don't think it's right for what we're doing right now, but keep going because we're somewhere close. Then it's that encouragement so that other people are willing to use their voice and say, okay, yeah, let me keep trying. And my kids, when they were little, actually 2 of my kids had the same teacher for first grade, and she celebrated failures. So when she was teaching something, she would always insist that the kids would jump in, raise their hand, whatever, and answer the question. And if they got it wrong, everybody would clap because it means that they tried.
They tried.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Again, we wait for that external validation. And so if we fail at something, we just aren't willing to raise our hand again because we want someone to celebrate us. So I always thought that was such a creative idea, saying, okay, great, you failed. Let's work it out. Let's see how the math problem is actually done. And but just keep trying, because if you're not failing, you're not trying.
Yeah. And it's such a great way to build confidence.
Yeah. I mean, keep going. It's the keep going. And, some of the most successful people out there, they look at failure as a stepping stone. They're like, okay, well, that sucked. What did I learn from it? Instead of that sucked. Oh, I'm never going to do anything again. But a lot of times and that's part of the real method, that idea of embracing your failures and saying, just because I failed at something doesn't make me a failure. It just means that didn't work. So what did I learn from it? How can I do it differently?
Yeah. And that's a really important mindset to have. Simone, if you had to sum up your philosophy of leadership and influence, what would it be?
So I'm going to give you two parts. I think the first part is you don't need to change who you are. You need to change the way you see yourself. So that would be number one. And number two, don't wait to start leading. Like, you're already a leader. Keep going.
Simone, thank you so much. This has been such a refreshing and grounding conversation. I love how you've reframed leadership as something that's not about hierarchy, but actually about humanity. It's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me here.
It's my pleasure. But before we wrap up, if someone listening would like to connect with you, where should they go to do that?
So, a couple of places. First of all, my second book comes out on February 17th. That book is called Real Confidence, A Simple Guide to Go from Unsure to Unshakable. And you can find that at realconfidencebook.com. And my website is SimoneKnego.com, SimoneKnego. And you can find me on social media, same Simone Knego. I'm the only one in the world, so it's pretty easy to find me.
Awesome. And to you, our listeners, thank you for being here. If you'd like to connect with Simone, pick up her book, learn more about her work, you can find all the links in the show description. And if this conversation resonated with you, take a moment this week to notice where you're already leading. It might not be on a stage or in a boardroom. It might just be right there at your kitchen table. Until next time, bye for now.